Chapter 1. The Quiet Years in Cedar Grove. For years, my children barely spoke to me until the day they marched back into my life, demanding $47,000 for my granddaughter's college tuition. They said I owed it to her, that a mother's love was measured in money. What they never imagined was that I had already built a secret education fund, not for them, but for the one young man who checked on me when no one else did. When they discovered the truth, my daughter asked where our family stood in my life, and I finally answered. My name is Marjorie Lane, and this is the moment I learned that sometimes the people who share your blood are not the ones who deserve your legacy. I was threading a needle when the morning sun slipped across the counter at Marjorie's stitchery, turning the dust in the air into soft gold. After all these years, the shop still woke up before I did. Seemed fitting for a place that had outlived my husband, most of my closest friends, and nearly every illusion I once had about family. Cedar Grove was quiet that way, the kind of Midwestern town where time hummed along like an old sewing machine, steady and familiar. I leaned closer to the hem of a church dress, my hands moving by memory. At 68, my fingers were slower, but somehow more certain. A few customers would wander in around 9, Mrs. Bennett with her choir skirts, or Mr. Langley asking me to patch the same jacket he refused to retire. Folks around here depended on routine the way some people depended on prayer. When the clock hit 8:30, I stepped into the back room and opened the wooden cabinet I had kept since Paul and I first moved here in the late 70s. Inside were boxes, arranged by years, not because I needed order, but because I needed proof that my life had once felt full. I lifted the lid of one box and saw a stack of birthday cards from my granddaughter Emma, lined up like thin pastel soldiers. I ran a thumb over one she made when she was 8. Crayon hearts, crooked letters, a smudge where she had dragged her hand through wet marker. I had not seen her in 4 years. That was no one's fault in particular. Life scattered people. Still, the truth of it settled somewhere low and familiar in my chest. Behind the cards sat a handful of old family photos. Paul, in his work shirt, smiling into the sun. Daniel and Karen leaning against each other on the farmhouse porch before they grew into their separate adult lives. I let my hand rest on the edge of the box for a moment and told myself what I told myself every time. They had their own worlds now, I had mine. And somewhere between 2015 and now, the calls faded, the holidays thinned out, and the idea of reaching out to them began to feel like intruding. The bell over the shop door jingled. I looked up just as Lucas Moreno ducked his head inside, wiping grease off his hands with an old rag. He was 22, but carried himself like someone older, someone who had learned early not to expect life to hand out favors. "Marge," he said in that easy tone of his, "your door hinge is crying again. Thought I would fix it before it scares off your customers." "You and your noise complaints," I teased, but my smile was real. Lucas had become something like the grandson I never had, comfortable in the quiet of my shop in a way my own children never were. He went straight to work, and I listened to the click of his tools as I finished the church dress. "Your mom doing all right?" I asked when he came to grab a bottle of water. "Working too much as usual," he said, "but she asked about you, said to remind you to come by if you need help with anything." He said it lightly, but there was history under those words. In the spring of 2020, when a fever laid me flat for a week and I was too weak to drive, it was Lucas and his mother Cheryl who checked on me, brought me soup, sat with me when the nights were long and frightening. I had told them they didn't need to do that. They came anyway. No fuss, no expectations, no demands. I never forgot it. By late afternoon, I closed the shop and walked toward the high school gym for the graduation ceremony Mrs. Halpern had begged me to attend. Her youngest was receiving a scholarship, and she wanted me there because I hemmed every dress that girl wore for a decade. The gym buzzed with families in bright summer clothes, parents fanning themselves with programs. I stood near the bleachers, taking in the scene. A mother in front of me whispered to her son as she straightened his gown. A father waved wildly at his daughter crossing the stage. People called out names and clapped until their palms turned red. I felt something shift in me then, a tiny tilt, like a thread being pulled. I was not sad exactly, just aware of the empty spaces. In a room full of people shouting for their families, no one was shouting for me. No one expected me to wave back. It was the kind of realization that didn't hurt sharply, it just settled over me, a gentle weight I had carried long enough to mistake for part of myself. When the ceremony ended, I congratulated Mrs. Halpern, hugged her daughter, and walked home through the soft heat of early summer. The sky was fading into that pale Midwestern blue that always made me think of washed denim. My feet knew the path by heart, and my mind drifted where it usually did on long walks. Paul's laugh, the way Cedar Grove looked the first winter we lived here, the quiet hope that maybe one day Daniel and Karen would drive up the street again. I unlocked my front door and set my purse on the hall table. The house felt especially still. I reached for my phone to check the time and noticed a single new message glowing on the screen. "Mom, we need to talk." I stood there with my hand still on the phone. My heart did not leap exactly, but it did tighten, cautious and curious at the same time. I had not heard from either of them in years. I didn't know if this message was from Daniel or Karen, or what could possibly be urgent enough for them to reach across the silence. I let the phone rest in my palm for a moment longer, feeling the familiar mix of hope and hesitation rise in me again, then set it down on the kitchen counter as the day outside slipped quietly into evening.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 2. When They Finally Return. I slept lightly that night, waking to the soft buzz of my phone on the bedside table. It was just after 7 and the house was still cool, the morning pressing in gently through the curtains. I reached for the phone without thinking and saw Daniel's name on the screen. For a moment, I simply watched it ring, remembering the last time I had heard his voice. 4 years can change a person. Sometimes it can empty them out. When I finally answered, his tone was quick and clipped, as if he were calling a coworker rather than his mother. He said he was in town for the day and wanted to meet. Before I could ask anything, he added that Karen would join us. Riverbend Cafe at 11. Then the line went dead. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed slowly, letting the weight of the morning settle. There was no warmth in his voice, no sense of missing me. It felt like receiving a formal notice rather than an invitation. Still, something in me wanted to go, not because I expected softness, but because some doors, once left closed too long, start to feel like they no longer belong to the house at all. At 10:45, I walked toward Riverbend Cafe, a small brick place near the old courthouse. The summer air moved in warm waves across the sidewalk, and the scent of roasted coffee drifted out whenever someone opened the door. I paused outside long enough to steady myself, then stepped in. Daniel was already seated, Karen as well. They looked up when I approached, but neither stood. Daniel gave a tight nod. Karen offered a smile that never met her eyes. I took the seat across from them and folded my hands in my lap. "You look well," I said quietly. Karen picked up her iced drink and stirred it. "Busy spring," she replied. "Emma had finals." The tone suggested small talk, but her eyes were sharp, assessing, almost impatient. Daniel leaned forward as if skipping past pleasantries he did not have time for. "We're going to get straight to it, Mom." He spoke with the confidence of someone used to presenting things in bullet points. "Emma got into the University of Minnesota Twin Cities nursing program. It is competitive," he added, waiting for me to be impressed. "That is wonderful," I said, and I meant it. Emma had always been a thoughtful girl. He nodded once, brisk. "Tuition is $47,000 a year. Loans will not cover everything, and we are stretched thin already." He glanced at Karen as if signaling her turn. Karen set her cup down and looked at me like a counselor delivering unwelcome truth. "Mom," she said, "you do not spend much. You have the house, the shop. We know you have some savings. Emma needs a fair start. She's worked hard for this. You have a chance to help her." Their words were polished, but the pressure underneath was unmistakable. They spoke to me with the smoothness of people making a business case, not a family request. It struck me then how unfamiliar their voices felt: polite, restrained, transactional. People talking at a distance, not across it. I asked how much they needed. Daniel let out a breath as if relieved to finally reach the point. "First year tuition, whatever you can manage. We figured this was the responsible thing. Families help each other." Responsible, families. The words settled strangely between us. I watched the two of them and tried to remember when we had last laughed together or eaten a meal that did not feel staged. The answer drifted away from me like smoke. "I would like some time to think," I said gently. Daniel's jaw tightened. "There is nothing to think about. Either you help or Emma suffers for it." He did not raise his voice, but the sharpness cut clean. Karen leaned forward, her face tightening with a kind of moral judgment that landed heavier than anger. "You owe her this, after everything she's been through." I felt the sting of that, but kept my voice steady. "I do not want to rush an answer." For a long second, none of us moved. The cafe noise carried on around us, spoons clinking, a child laughing near the pastry case, the hiss of milk steaming, ordinary sounds that made the tension at our table feel even sharper. I stood. It was not dramatic. It was simply the only thing left to do. "Thank you for meeting me," I said. "I will be in touch." Daniel exhaled hard and looked away. Karen pressed her lips together as if holding back more words she wanted to throw at me. Neither reached out. Neither asked me to sit again. Outside, the air felt cooler, or maybe it was the relief of stepping out from under their expectations. I walked to the bus stop at the end of the block. The noon heat shimmered over the cornfields in the distance, and a breeze moved through the tall grass like a slow wave. When the bus arrived, I climbed aboard and took a seat by the window. As we rolled past the quiet roads leading back toward my neighborhood, I let my forehead rest lightly against the cool glass. There was no anger in me yet, only a tired sense of understanding. Whatever had brought them back into my life today had little to do with me, but somewhere beneath the ache of that truth, something else stirred. Not quite resolve, but the beginning of it. I watched the fields slide by in long green strokes and let the hum of the engine steady my breath while the bus carried me home.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 3. The Fund They Never Imagined. I let myself into the house and hung my bag on the hook by the door, the quiet settling around me like a familiar coat. I made a cup of tea, set it untouched on the table, then walked to the small safe tucked behind the linen shelves. My hands moved without hurry. I had opened this safe countless times, mostly to check that everything was still exactly where I left it. Today felt different, as if the meeting at Riverbend had stirred something that had been sleeping inside me. I knelt, spun the dial, and lifted the door open. Inside lay a row of envelopes arranged neatly. Saving statements, insurance files, old tax forms, nothing glamorous, nothing close to what Daniel and Karen seemed to imagine. I took the savings envelope first, opened it, and scanned the numbers. Enough for my modest life, for repairs, for groceries, for an emergency now and then. Not enough to shoulder a university bill for someone who never called unless she needed to. I set the envelope aside and reached for a thicker folder, Education Fund 2020. The cardstock felt cool against my palm. I slid out the documents carefully. In the dim hallway light, the signature of the fund administrator shone faintly. I had almost forgotten the weight of that decision. It was the summer after my illness, when I could barely catch my breath walking from the bedroom to the porch. Paul's picture had been on the dresser, and I kept thinking of everything he had wanted to study but never had the chance. how he used to say that knowledge was the one thing you could give freely without losing any of your own. The idea had planted itself inside me quietly. A scholarship in his memory, something small but steady for a young person who had no one to stand behind them. That was all I told the fund coordinator. I left the rest open, trusting life to point me toward the right person when the time came. I closed the folder just as a car door slammed outside. I paused, then heard quick steps on the porch. Before I could stand fully, the screen door creaked and Karen's silhouette appeared in the frame as she called out, "Mom, are you home?" I stepped into the living room. Karen walked in without waiting, her eyes moving across the furniture as if cataloging items in an estate sale. She carried a stack of mail she must have grabbed from the porch. "I thought I would drop these off," she said with a brightness that felt practiced, "and maybe help you sort through some paperwork. Retirement accounts can get confusing." I kept my voice polite. "I manage fine." She was already scanning the room, picking up a framed photo and setting it down again. Her gaze flicked to the hallway behind me. "Do you have any life insurance documents? Or the deed? It might be smart to get everything in order, just in case." In case of what, I wanted to ask, but instead I stepped aside slightly, blocking the view to the open safe. She moved past me quicker than I expected, and the moment she spotted the safe door ajar, her expression changed. Not shock, not guilt, but something sharper. Curiosity edged with entitlement. "What is all this?" she asked, reaching toward the envelopes. I slid the door closed with my hand still inside. "Just personal records." Karen leaned in, her brows tightening. "Let me help. If you are organizing things, we should know what is here." I held her gaze. "I can handle my own paperwork." She exhaled, annoyed, and pulled back slightly, but her eyes had already caught the corner of the Education Fund 2020 folder that I had placed on the arm of the sofa. She stepped toward it and picked it up before I could move. The pages inside rustled as she opened it. "What is this, Mom? Why do you have an education fund? For who?" I reached out and took the folder gently but firmly from her hands. "That is private." "Private." She repeated the word as if tasting it. "You have money set aside and did not tell us? Why? Who are you giving it to?" "That is not your concern," I said. She stared at me, and for a moment, something almost like disbelief crossed her face. "You are hiding money from your own children? Is that what this is? You will not help your granddaughter, but you have some secret fund sitting here?" I steadied my breath. "Karen," I said quietly, "please leave this be." Her voice sharpened, no longer pretending. "What are you planning to do with it? Who is it for?" Before I could answer, there was a quick knock at the door, and Lucas stepped inside with a set of pliers in his hand. He froze when he saw Karen's expression. "Sorry, Marge. I was just dropping this off. I can come back later." Karen turned toward him with a dismissive shake of her head. "This is a family matter. You do not need to involve yourself." Lucas's posture stayed relaxed, but his voice held a calm edge I'd only heard once before. Family is not always the people you share a name with. Karen blinked, stunned by the simple truth of it. Her mouth opened, then closed, and the color in her cheeks rose. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and walked out, the screen door snapping shut behind her. Lucas watched her car back down the driveway. He set the pliers on the table and looked at me with quiet concern. "You all right?" I nodded, though my hands were still trembling slightly. "She found the folder." He glanced at it, then back at me. "Do you need me to stay?" "No, thank you," I said gently. "I just need a moment." He hesitated, then touched my arm briefly before stepping outside. When the house was silent again, I picked up the folder and held it against my chest. The papers felt heavier now, as if carrying the weight of choices I had postponed for too long. I walked back to the safe, placed everything inside, and closed the door. My fingers lingered on the metal dial. I knew the time was coming when I would have to decide exactly what that fund was meant to do and who it was meant to help. The thought didn't scare me. It steadied me. The afternoon light shifted across the floor as I stood there, the house quiet around me, and for the first time since the message arrived, I felt the path ahead begin to take shape.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 4: The Decision That Changed Everything. I woke early the next morning with a steadiness I had not felt in years. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked patiently as I typed a short email to Daniel and Karen. I told them I could not provide the money they had asked for. I wrote that I wished Emma the best, that I hoped she would find her own path, and that this decision was not made out of anger. I did not defend myself. I did not apologize. I simply pressed send and closed the laptop. The phone rang less than 3 minutes later. Daniel's voice came through sharp and fast. "You are being selfish, Mom. Emma needs this. You know she does." I kept my tone calm. "Daniel, I understand this is difficult." He cut in as if he had not heard me at all. "You just do not want to help. You will sit on your money while your granddaughter suffers. What kind of person does that?" Before I could answer, he hung up. A string of messages from Karen lit up the screen almost immediately. "You do not care about family. You know Emma worked so hard. You always make things about yourself. We are asking for help, not charity." I set the phone face down. The kitchen filled with a quiet that felt heavier than usual. I had spent so many years believing that love meant offering whatever was needed, even when no one offered anything back. Now, listening to their voices echo in my head, I realized how differently they saw it. Not as love, but as obligation, a debt they believed I owed simply because I was their mother. I let the realization settle. It did not hurt in the way I expected. It felt more like stepping out of a room that had been dim for so long I had forgotten what light looked like. By mid-afternoon, I walked to the shop, unlocked the door, and let the familiar scent of cotton and machine oil surround me. Lucas arrived not long after, pushing the door with his shoulder while balancing a box of parts. "Got your sewing machine motor fixed," he said. "Thought you might want it before the weekend rush." I nodded and motioned him inside. I waited until he set the box down before speaking. "Lucas, could you sit for a moment?" He looked surprised, but pulled out a chair. I went to the back and brought out the folder. Education Fund 2020. It felt strangely small in my hands. I sat across from him and placed the folder on the table. "I want you to have this," I said. He looked at the folder, then at me, uncertain. "What is it?" "Open it." He slid the papers out, scanning the first page, then the second. His brow furrowed. "Marge, this is an education grant. For me." "If you want it," I said. He stared at the page as if it were something fragile. "But I've been thinking of dropping the college applications. I cannot afford the program and the deadlines are tight. I did not want to bother anyone with it." "You got into the mechanical engineering program at Kirkwood," I said. "I saw the letter on your counter when I brought soup last month. You tried to hide it under a magazine." His face flushed. I was not sure it would work out. "You have worked for everything you have," I said softly. "You show up for people. You show up for me. And you deserve a chance at something bigger than this town gives you." He swallowed hard. "Why me?" "Because you knock on my door to check if I'm all right, not to ask for anything. Because you understand what effort looks like. Because someone once did the same for me when I was young, and I remember what it meant." He held the papers tighter, blinking quickly. "Marge, I do not know what to say." "Then don't say anything yet," I answered. "Just think about it." The door creaked open behind us. I turned and saw Karen standing at the threshold of the shop. She did not step inside. She held her phone in one hand and her sunglasses in the other. Her face was pale, almost uncertain. "Mom, is it true? Did you really send that email?" I stood, keeping my voice steady. "Yes, Karen, I did." She looked past me and noticed the folder in Lucas's hands. Her expression shifted as if she had been struck in the chest. "So that's it," she said. "That's where your money is going? To him?" Lucas stood, but I lifted a hand slightly to keep him from stepping forward. "Karen, this is not about replacing anyone. This is about doing what I believe is right." Her voice cracked. "And we're not right? Your own family." I took a slow breath. The truth is that responsibility can only grow where there has been something to nurture it. You and Daniel have your own lives. You've had them for years. I was not part of them, and that was your choice. I'm simply living with the result. Karen pressed her lips together as tears gathered in her eyes. "Where do we stand in your life now?" "In the place you left me." She looked down, her shoulders tightening like someone holding herself against cold wind. There were 100 things she could have said in that moment, maybe even an apology if pride had not stood in her way. But instead, she wiped her cheek with the back of her hand and stepped back from the doorway. "I guess I misjudged a lot," she whispered. Then she turned, walked to her car, and drove away without looking back. The shop fell quiet again. Lucas stood near the counter, the folder still held against his chest as if he didn't trust his hands to keep steady. "You sure you're all right?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm all right. More than all right." He gave a small nod and stepped outside, leaving me alone in the soft hum of the late afternoon. I locked the door, turned off the sewing lamp, and stood for a long moment in the quiet of the shop. My breath felt even, my thoughts clearer than they had been in a long time. The decision was made, the weight had shifted, and for once, the path ahead did not feel like something I needed to fear.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 5: Consequences, Peace, and What Love Really Means. The next few weeks settled into a different kind of quiet. At first, I waited for the phone to ring again, for Daniel or Karen to decide they had said enough and wanted to try something softer. That call never came. Instead, there were short messages now and then, practical ones about paperwork they needed for Emma, nothing more. They were polite and clipped, and I answered the necessary questions without inviting extra words. Word traveled in Cedar Grove faster than anyone admitted. I heard in small pieces how Daniel had taken on extra shifts and missed a regional trip that might have led to a promotion. A customer mentioned it while I pinned her hem, not knowing she was handing me another small piece of my son's life. From someone else, I heard that Karen had started doing freelance events outside the city because the household budget was tight. None of it felt like punishment. It felt like the ordinary friction of adult choices, the way every family learns that money has teeth. Life in the shop went on. I hemmed jeans, repaired an old wedding dress for a woman who wanted to renew her vows, let the radio murmur in the background. Some days I barely thought about the fund or the argument at Riverbend. Other days it rose in my mind with sharp clarity, and I reminded myself that I had made the best choice I could. One Tuesday afternoon, when the light came in clean through the front windows and caught the dust like fine lace, the bell over the door chimed. I looked up, expecting one of my regulars, and saw Emma standing there. For a moment, I simply took her in. Taller than the little girl in my photos, her hair pulled back, a backpack slung over one shoulder. There was a nervousness in the way she held herself, but her eyes met mine steadily. "Hi, Grandma," she said. The word reached me in a place that had been quiet for a long time. I wiped my hands on my apron and came around the counter. "Hello, Emma," I answered. "What brings you here?" She looked down, then back up. "I am not here to ask for money. I just wanted to say that first." I nodded and waited. She took a breath. "Mom and Dad are pretty upset. I have heard their side. I figured I should at least hear yours." There was no accusation in her voice, only a tired honesty. I gestured toward the chair by the fitting room, and we sat. I told her about the years after Paul died, about learning to run the shop alone. I told her about the nights I lay awake wondering if I had pushed her father too hard when he was young, if that was why he pulled away. I described the small decisions that turned into distance, how a missed holiday became a missed year. I did not call Daniel or Karen ungrateful. I did not hand her a list of their failures. I only spoke about how it felt on my side of the silence. She listened without interrupting, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze never leaving my face. I mentioned the illness in 2020, how Lucas and his mother had shown up without being asked. I said that sometimes the people who stand closest in a storm are not the ones who share your last name. I told her I had created the education fund in Paul's memory, hoping to give someone else a chance at the kind of learning he had always wanted. "You chose Lucas," she said softly. "Yes, I chose Lucas." She nodded slowly. "He deserves it. He's the only one who ever fixed Mom's car for free." That made me laugh. It slipped out before I could stop it, and Emma smiled a little too. I added that my decision about the fund did not mean I loved her any less, only that I could not carry what her parents wanted me to carry. Love, I told her, did not always look like pulling out a checkbook. Sometimes it looked like keeping yourself whole. For a while, we sat in the hum of the shop, just listening to the old ceiling fan and the faint traffic outside. "Do you think," she asked finally, "that I could spend some time here? Not to take anything, to help. I am trying to figure out next steps with school. Maybe I can earn a bit and just be around you if you want that." The question was so careful it almost broke my heart. I told her I would like that very much. Within a week, Emma started coming in 3 afternoons. At first, she folded fabric and swept, humming under her breath. Then she asked if she could post pictures of the shop on social media. I did not fully understand what that meant, but I told her to try. Apparently, the internet liked old lace and small-town stories, because within a month, I had people driving in from 2 towns over to drop off repairs and get dresses altered. They would smile and say they'd seen the shop online. Emma would grin as if she'd pulled off a magic trick. I watched her move around the room with growing ease, slipping between customers and hangers like she had always belonged there. The work gave her a little money, a little pride, and gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing: a young voice in the room, the rustle of shared laughter. On a late summer evening, just as we were pulling the shades down, Lucas appeared at the door with an envelope in his hand. His face was bright in a way I hadn't seen before. "I think you should open this," he said, handing it to me. I unfolded the letter. The seal at the top made my chest tighten. Kirkwood Community College. Acceptance confirmed for the Mechanical Engineering Technology program starting in 2025. I read the lines twice, even though I understood them the first time. "So they said yes," I murmured. "They did, and they said the funding cleared. That part was you." I looked at him, then at Emma, who had come to stand by the counter, eyes wide. I told Lucas that the hard part from here would be his: classes, labs, long nights. He smiled and said those were the parts he was ready for. Then he thanked me in that quiet way of his, not with big speeches, just with the kind of look that told me he understood the size of what passed between us. After he left, Emma and I stepped outside to lock the door. The sky over Cedar Grove was painted in soft orange and purple, the fields stretching in patient lines to the horizon. The air felt full and still. Standing there between the girl who was learning to know me on her own terms and the boy who had chosen to treat me like family long before there was any money in the picture, I understood something I had been circling for a long time. Family can be chosen as much as it is given. Blood ties are real, but so are the bonds we build with the people who show up, who listen, who knock on our door with concern in their eyes instead of a list of demands. If you've ever sat alone in a quiet house, wondering whether you're only useful when someone needs something from you, I hope my story reaches you in the right way. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is learn to say no to the hands that take you for granted, and yes to the hearts that truly see you. You are allowed to choose where your love goes. You are allowed to protect the part of yourself that still believes in being treated with care. I looked at the glow over the Iowa fields one last time. then stepped back into the little shop that somehow had become the center of a new kind of family and closed the door for the night.